My channel. So today's video is going to be all about hermit crab shells. Some of the most common questions that I get on different videos are about hermit crab shells. Where to get them, where to buy them, what size to get, which ones are safe and unsafe, and so many more questions. So I thought that I would sit down and do a video specifically about all things hermit crab shells for you guys. I know that you guys absolutely love hermit crabs, and I know that I'm one of the very few pet tubers who actually has them and makes videos on them, but now I finally have some time, so we are going to sit down and talk about all things hermit crab shells. We're going to discuss where to buy them, what types to buy, what size to get, and which ones are safe and unsafe for your little crab. If you guys enjoyed this hermit crab video, feel free to subscribe down below. I really appreciate it. Also, a quick disclaimer before we get into the video. In no way, shape, or form am I encouraging any of you to go out and buy hermit crabs. If you guys are familiar with my channel, then you know that I do have hermit crabs. I've had them for over 9 years. However, I do not encourage anyone to go out and get them or buy them. There are many reasons why I don't encourage it. Number one, they are wild caught, which is awful. Also, once they are wild caught, they are highly stressed. They are forced into painted shells, which are toxic, which we're going to cover later on in this video. And they also pass away very quickly due to lack of proper care in pet stores. And then once they are sold, it's just a vicious cycle, and I really want to cut down on that. However, even though I don't support the sale of hermit crabs anymore, I have had my hermit crabs a very long time, and I really do like them. And I know that a lot of people own hermit crabs. Some of you guys have had your hermit crabs a really long time. Some of you guys win them at fairs because unfortunately they are given out as prizes at mini fairs and carnivals, which again, I don't support that and I do not encourage that, but it does happen. So I want to make these informational videos to help you guys out. But with all that said, let's talk about hermit crab shells. So the first thing we're going to talk about is where to buy them. This is one of my most commonly asked questions because a lot of people have a really hard time finding good hermit crab shells. One of them is actually beach gift shops. If you ever frequent the beach, if you go on vacation with your family to Florida or anything like that, if you go to a lot of different gift shops down there, you will find that they sell a lot of seashells. Now, obviously, some of the shells may be painted or glossed or things like that, so you want to be careful to make sure that there is nothing toxic on the outside of the shells, which is something we're going to talk more about in a minute. But I find that lots of gift shops at the beach have lots of really beautiful, pure shells that you can get, and they are perfectly safe for your hermit crabs. Obviously, make sure to boil them really well before you use them, but if you know what to look for, you can find a lot of really beautiful, safe shells for your crabs there. The second place I recommend looking for hermit crab shells is hobby gift shops like Hobby Lobby, Joann's Fabric, or any type of craft shops near you. A lot of times craft shops will sell shells individually or in little packs of like multi-packs of maybe like 4 or more, but they do sell them, and 9 times out of 10 they are not painted. Usually there's no gloss or anything like that on them, so they should be safe to get. Just make sure that you know what to look for and check them over very well. And the third place that I recommend getting your hermit crab shells is online. I personally have bought a lot of shells off of eBay. You can find lots of hermit crab shells off of eBay. I did recently buy some off of eBay and they're beautiful, and I want to show them to you guys. The only thing that I warn with eBay is, again, make sure they're not painted. Make sure they are not painted with any type of a clear gloss. However, buffed is fine. If it says polished, that is usually okay. That means that they usually buffed it out with some sort of a polisher, but it's usually non-chemical. But luckily you can contact the seller on eBay and ask them and make sure that it was polished or buffed and not glossed or painted, and you should be able to get that answer from them pretty easily. And of course, there are other websites online also that sell hermit crab shells. You'll just have to do the research and find them for yourself, making sure that those shells are safe. Let's talk about what shells are safe to get and unsafe to get for your hermit crabs. Obviously, if you've done any research whatsoever on hermit crabs in general and shells, then you know that painted shells are a huge no-no in the hermit crab world. Salt water is very corrosive, and obviously if you're taking proper care of your hermit crabs, then you probably have bowls of fresh and salt water in your enclosures. If a painted shell gets in and out of that salt water over and over while your hermit crab is soaking, the paint can actually flake off in there and become very toxic and can actually hurt your hermit crab. So painted shells are a really big no-no. Painted gloss shells, which just have a clear paint on them, are also very toxic. So again, that is also a no-no. However, polished shells, aka buff shells, are safe. Again, if you're worried, make sure to read the fine print, do your research always before giving them to your hermit crabs, and don't forget to boil them. To give you an example of a polished shell and an unpolished shell, here are two shells. This shell over here is unpolished. As you can see, it's beautiful, but it's very rough in texture. and it's not shiny. However, this is a polished pearl shell. It has been buffed and polished. However, no chemicals were used, and it is completely safe for hermit crabs. So that is what a polished and an unpolished shell look like. This is an example of a painted shell that you may find on your hermit crab when you buy them from places like beach gift shops or Petco's or PetSmart. These shells are extremely toxic, and you should never ever provide these shells to your hermit crabs to change into. If you do buy a hermit crab that is in a painted shell like this, make sure to give your hermit crab plenty of safe options so that they can switch out of this shell very soon and switch into a safe polished or unpolished shell. This is actually a shell that one of my hermit crabs came in 9 years ago whenever I got her. This is a toxic painted unsafe shell, and this one over here is a gorgeous polished pearl shell that is completely safe for hermit crabs. Hermit crabs come in all shapes and sizes, and so do their shells. Here's an example of how tiny a shell can be whenever you first get them. This is actually the shell that Gunner was in whenever I very first got him. As you can see, this shell is safe. It is a tiny, tiny turbo shell. So as you can see, that is a pretty big size difference between these two. And here's an example of how large a hermit crab can be. This is actually a polished turbo shell that I actually recently bought off eBay. I think this shell is absolutely beautiful, but this shell will give you an idea as to how large a hermit crab can potentially get if they do live their full lifespan. Here are two more shells that I recently bought. These shells are very, very large. My hermit crabs are nowhere near big enough to go into these. However, hopefully if they continue to grow one day, they will be big enough to fit into these shells. These shells are incredibly large. They are also polished and buffed, but they are safe for hermit crabs. That's the fun thing about getting shells online. As long as they're safe, you can get so many beautiful shells. Just to give you an idea of that size difference, here is a small 2-inch turbo shell. This would be for a full-sized hermit crab. Now we're going to talk about what types of shells that you should buy, specifically shapes and sizes. So I'm going to show you the #1 type of hermit crab shell that I suggest. I find that all of my hermit crabs love these types of shells. And I'm also going to show you a couple of shells that you should not get because they are not the proper size and opening size for hermit crabs. So one of the main things that you want to look out for whenever you're picking out shells for your crab is make sure that the opening that the crab slips into is very large, round, and easy for them to get in. You don't want to get a shell that has a very long and narrow opening because hermit crabs obviously are very round shapen whenever they slide in and out. You'll also find that your hermit crabs will really prefer these type of shells. Both of these shells that I'm showing you right now are actually turbo shells. As you can see, they both have very short butts and very large round openings that make it great for the hermit crab to be able to slip in and out. Here's an example of a shell that you probably wouldn't want to provide to your hermit crabs. While this shell is absolutely beautiful, it's very short and it has a very perfect long opening, but as you can see, this shell has a huge long point at the end of it, which is going to make it so that this shell is very hard to maneuver around in any type of a tank. Now, one thing you probably could do would be to break this off of the hermit crab shell so that only this part was exposed, but that does risk cracking the shell and causing some issues, so I would be very careful with that. But in general, even though this opening is perfect, this part right here is going to make it very hard for the crab to maneuver around. So I personally wouldn't suggest a shell like this. Here is another shell that I would not suggest for a hermit crab. This is a small conch shell, and in true conch shell form, it does have a very long and narrow opening. This shell would be very unpopular among hermit crabs because the opening is very, very slanted. As large of a shell as this is and as heavy as it is, any hermit crab that was strong enough to carry this shell around won't be able to fit in this very narrow opening here. So again, this type of conch shell with a very long narrow opening, I personally wouldn't give a shell like this to my hermit crabs. I would stick to a turbo shell or any type of a shell with a very, very large, not narrow opening for them to slide in and out of. Also, beware of shells that you get at pet stores. These are a commonly sold brand by FMR. These are large hermit crab shells. They do come in various shapes and sizes. However, as you can see, these shells are painted with a clear gloss. It's actually a shell lacquer. These are extremely toxic, and these are often mistaken for polished or buff shells, which are also shiny. However, this is not a natural polished buffer. This is a clear painted lacquer, and it is very toxic to hermit crabs. So make sure to avoid shells like these with a painted gloss from pet stores. So now that I've showed you guys which shells are safe and unsafe, what size and shape that you can probably look for when picking your shells, and also what painted versus polished is. Now we can talk about how to know what size shell to buy for your crabs so that they can move up properly. A good rule of thumb whenever buying your hermit crab shells, more shells for them to move into as they grow and molt, to go up about one size from the shell that they're already in. So in order to show this to you guys, I'm actually going to go get my hermit crabs out, and I'm going to show you guys the current shell that they are currently in, and also the shells that I provide to them that they will be able to move into once they start molting and they get bigger. Okay, so here we have my two hermit crabs. This is Spongebob and Gunner. Spongebob is the bigger one, Gunner is the little one. And I'm going to show you guys the shells that I keep in their enclosures so that they can move into as soon as they molt, and they'll want to be moving out of these shells once they grow a little bit. So we will start with Spongebob first since he's the bigger one. I'm going to show you guys some shells that I would offer to him for him to move into once he gets ready to move out of that one. Okay, so for Spongebob, here are 3 shells that are slightly bigger than the one that he's currently in. As you can see, these are all fairly bigger than him. So he would be able to move in any one of these once he's a little bit bigger. These are all 3 robo shells, and they are all safe for hermit crabs. Now here's Gunner. He's slightly smaller, so these are 3 shells that he could potentially move into once he was ready to move out of his current shell. And as you can see, he's pretty small, so these shells are all slightly bigger than the one that he's currently in. Now we're going to put them back so we don't stress them out. I have them just here soaking in some dechlorinated water while I show them to you guys, and I show you guys the shells that they will be moving into. But small shells like these that are just slightly bigger than the ones that they're currently in are perfect for your hermit crabs to be able to move into. Also, as you guys can see, all of the openings on these turbo shells are perfect. That's why I love turbo shells. I feel like they are the best shells that you can get for hermit crabs because their openings are so large. They've got really short, stumpy butts. My hermit crabs just really prefer turbo shells, and I find that they move into them the easiest. Just make sure you're picking small, short shells that have a really big opening, and your hermit crabs will love them. Okay guys, that is it for this hermit crab shell video. I hope that you guys enjoyed and learned something new. If you guys enjoyed watching this video and seeing my hermit crabs and all of the different shells that I've bought, feel free to subscribe down below. It really helps me out. If you don't already follow me on Instagram or Snapchat, I will put that on the screen for you. If there's any other hermit crab videos you guys would like to see or any other videos at all on my channel, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Be kind. Bye.